So in case you didn't know already, this reel right here is the Okuma HAKAI. And in my opinion, this just might be the first reel in a new generation of future Okuma baitcasters that will bring them a lot more attention. And that's due to the fact that this particular reel is probably the biggest bang for your buck of all time. It basically gives you METANIUM and STEEZ level specs for CURADO and TATULA money. Now if you want all the details on this reel, I'm going to leave a link in the description of my unboxing and analysis of this reel, where I break down all the little features and specs of this reel that make it such a bargain. And I'm also going to put the link to my casting impressions video, as well as the link to 2 other videos on this reel. One of them is by Debos Fishing. Everyone knows Debo. He got one of these reels early just like I did, and he released his opinion on it. And I'm also going to leave a link to another video by Tacklejunky81s. Now he did a casting video and he showed just how far this reel could cast. So if you want more information on this reel, check out the links in the description. Now the funny thing is, this reel has only been for sale officially for I guess a few weeks now, but it looks like they're planning on coming out with an upgraded model. And I happen to have one of those models right here. And that's because the guys over at Dream Tackle Design, the ones who designed the spool for the Hakai, contacted me a few weeks ago and asked me if I wanted to check out the upgraded version of the Hakai. And of course I said, hell yes. I've been sitting on this reel for a couple of weeks, and that's because of course the new ALDEBARAN BFS came out, and that takes precedence over everything. But here it is, and let's see what this reel's all about. So the footage you guys saw was footage that Dream Tackle sent me, and obviously you could see it was shot with a very high quality camera, probably a full frame Sony with high dollar glass. But now that footage is over, let me let you guys take a closer look at this reel. Now the first thing I immediately noticed is that they sent me a left-handed reel, even though I'm right-handed, but that's okay. And yeah, take a look at this reel. You can see even in the silver color, it's got a nice, handsome, good-looking shape to it. There's that side plate. Looks like the Hakai logo is gone. Not sure if this is going to be named Hakai or not. And one thing that obviously draws your eye is going to be all these red components. Spool's now red. The drag star is now red. It's aluminum machined. Looks like it's 6-pointed. The spool tension cap is also machined aluminum. It's got the red knob end caps there. It's got a carbon fiber handle with the red nut retainer. You can see that the trim around the gearbox is very reminiscent of the DAIWA ZILLION 10 and the old ZILLION 9, the one with the lime green color accents. So that's been upgraded. And you even get an upgraded, I believe they call this the pawl cap. And that's not plastic, that's machined aluminum right there. Cold to the touch. Then there's that spool. The thumb bar is no longer shiny, but it's got some kind of a tacky feel to it for more grip. And that was one of the things that concerned me about the Hakai, was that the shiny thumb bar would get slippery when it got wet. And let me show you the difference. In fact, look at the difference between the two reels. Do you prefer the red and silver or the mostly black and silver? Now, one thing that appears to be gone is going to be that line indicator. Yep, that's not there anymore. But yeah, I really like this 6-pointed drag star. It's got nice positive micro clicks to it. Spool tension doesn't click, unfortunately, but it's very easy to turn and it's very smooth to turn. It feels like it's probably got an O-ring under there. And yeah, there's the brake dial. So the silver color really shows you what a good looking shape the Hakai is. Now what's welcome to me is that they went with flat knobs instead of the, I guess, mini power style knobs. And yeah, it just looks like a tricked out version of the Hakai. So you saw on the box it really didn't have a name, it just said Dream Tackle or something like that. So they may be naming this reel something completely different. Now, according to Michael over at Dream Tackle, cosmetics is not the only thing that they've changed on this reel. They actually made some, I guess, slight improvements to the spool. And with that being said, I'm going to pull the scale out and we're going to get some weights. Okay, so I got the scale out, and when I first pulled this reel out of the box, we're just going to call it the prototype. The first thing I noticed was that it felt heavier than the Hakai. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if it was probably a ½ ounce heavier. But let's see what the scale says. Now the Hakai in the 6 gear ratio comes in at 5.93 ounces. Now the prototype, 6.08 ounces, so they're literally the same weight. Well, I guess now that I hold them back to back, they do feel like they weigh about the same, but I swear, one thing that got my attention pulling this reel out of the box was the weight. So basically, all these machined aluminum components that you get in this prototype reel don't really add any weight to it at all. And that's probably helped by this nice looking carbon fiber handle. It's got a nice shape to it. Alright, so one thing that you'll immediately notice is that the prototype reel seems to have holes drilled into it. Now when I asked what the changes that they made to this reel versus the Hakai, other than the, I guess, component set and color, they said they did something to the spool to either make it stronger or lighter. I have to reread that email. But let's pull out the special spool scale and see if it lost any weight. Okay, so I got the spools out and now I can see the changes that they made. And I think it's pretty obvious with the prototype they went with a shorter spool shaft, and I believe from the information that they gave me that the spool shaft itself is slightly thinner, and also they got rid of the pressed balls at the end that the Hakai had right there. Now when I was casting the Hakai, I found that the best casting was done with the spool tension set to just minimize the side-to-side play and maybe just a hair looser. So the way I set the Hakai up, these balls would never really come into play. Now if you're the type of person that likes the tighter spool tension, I could see where they would become a benefit, but they seem to have removed that on the prototype, and that's probably because the spool shaft probably has to come into contact with either a plastic or metal piece going through the pinion, and I can't tell if it's plastic or metal, but either way, the new spool's got a shorter spool shaft, so it should be lighter. They feel about the same, and you can see in the center they have ported out some materials as well as the holes in the center, while the Hakai spool doesn't have any porting at all. Now let's get to some weights. Now both of these reels have spool bearings, and the Hakai spool weighs in at an unreal 9.58 grams with the spool bearing, and I think Okuma says that it weighs about 8.5 grams without. Now normally I would take the spool bearing off, but since they have an O-ring there, it might be really hard for me to put that O-ring back on. But now it's time to weigh the prototype spool. 8.91. So the prototype spool did lose over half a gram of weight. So if we took this bearing off, you're probably looking at a potentially sub 8 gram spool. Now there's only one spool of any stock reel that I know of that's not a bait finesse spool that is lighter than that, and that is the $500 Abu Garcia REVO MG Extreme. So indeed, this prototype reel does get what appears to be a performance upgrade in the form of a lighter spool with a short spool shaft, even though personally I've never felt that a short spool shaft improved any kind of performance, but it does save weight. Now when it comes to the braking system, they look to be the same. You got, what, 8 magnets there, and I guess slots for 2 more, but I doubt you'll ever need to add magnets to these brakes because they are very, very strong. In fact, I think the Hakai may be slightly over braked, and that's probably due to the fact that this, I guess, plate here is so big, it gives so much surface area to conduct magnetic current, and apparently the prototype reel has the same little mirror-like metal plate. Okay, so a couple of things before I go over my initial impressions of this reel, and that is, if you don't like red color trim pieces, I was told that you'll have the option of blue color trim pieces. So instead of silver and red, I believe you'll have the option of silver and blue if you like blue better. Now the second thing is that I was told this reel is supposed to retail for $219. So that is significantly more expensive than the Hakai, which retails for only $170. But I think this reel is going to be replacing the Helios series as Okuma's top of the line baitcaster. Could be wrong, but those reels were priced at about $219 as well. And even at $219, this reel is still a huge bargain considering the quality of the components. I mean, these are not cheaply made. They're precision made, they feel precision, they look good. But yeah, $219 suggested retail is what I was told. And with that being said, let's go over the one change that I would have done to this reel. Now to lead into the one thing that I would have done differently about this new prototype reel, let's talk about this reel first. Now I did the casting impressions video of this reel where I casted it by itself and it seemed pretty impressive. And this winter I actually took it out to the casting field and I wanted to see if this reel could dethrone the mighty Shimano METANIUM casting a 1/4 ounce casting plug. And just for fun, I brought out the $550 DAIWA STEEZ as well. Now I never published that video because I blew the spool up on the METANIUM before I could get some measure casts in, at least official ones. But I was able to complete 5 casts with the STEEZ and 5 casts with the Hakai. And here are the numbers right here. Now Hakai loose 6, that means the spool tension and the brake setting. And the STEEZ, I forget what the brake setting was, but you can see these numbers are very similar. In fact, if I averaged them out, it wouldn't surprise me if the Hakai eked out a win over the STEEZ. But the point is this, with such a lightweight spool, I expected the Hakai to perform a lot better, at least with the casting plug. Now it did pretty much equal the STEEZ, but in my opinion the STEEZ is overbraked. And that brings us to the one thing that I would have done differently with this reel, and that is I would have fitted it with some kind of centrifugal brake system. Because in all my years of field casting reels, putting up one reel against another with all sorts of different brake systems, there's nothing that kills the potential of a super lightweight high performing spool than magnetic brakes. And in fact, there's a reason why all companies other than DAIWA use centrifugal brakes for their more expensive and top of the line baitcasters. That's because centrifugal brakes allow the spool to spin faster, therefore cast farther, pitch better with lower trajectory, and just the overall feel of casting a reel with centrifugal brakes, in my opinion, is a higher end experience than a reel with magnetic brakes. Now this of course is excluding Shimano's DC reels because they're in a class on their own. So for example, you take a STEEZ SV and a Shimano Antares, which are very similar in price, both of them are considered top of the line bait casters here in America, and you cast them side by side, and that Antares is on a whole different level than the STEEZ casting wise, in distance and especially in casting feel. Now I'm not sure what centrifugal brake systems that Okuma or Dream Tackle have access to, or if they're even willing to test it out, but if you can, try to take a reel and slap some centrifugal brakes on it and test that reel out and you'll see what I'm talking about. But then again, that's just my opinion. But yeah, so far this new prototype reel, once again I'm not sure what it's going to be called, looks to be at least aesthetically a big improvement over the Helios reels that it looks like it's going to be replacing. Now I'm not sure when they're going to bring these over to America for sale. Maybe they'll announce them at iCast, who knows. But what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to string this reel up and cast it around to see if I can see any kind of difference between this and the Hakai, because maybe they did some other kind of improvements that'll give it a performance edge over the Hakai. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to make a video on that or not, but if I do see a market improvement, I will let you guys know. Alright guys, thanks a lot.